Right, let's get this panel going. I would like to introduce an excellent person in the longevity field and regenerative medicine area, both on the science and on the investment side of things, who also doubles up as my wife, Dr. Jyothi Devakumar, who will chair this session. Thanks.
Thank you. This has been an exciting session and great session organization by both Martin and Aubrey. Thank you. I'm really excited with this panel, though despite the fact that we've had several changes, I would have loved to have Nair, but unfortunately Nair is not able to join. But instead of Andrea, we have Evelyn. Fortunate to have you here. So this, in a very Aubrey-esque way, he's termed this humans as the better organisms, or I want to just translate it into a clinical translational panel for the convenience of getting the discussion going. Often I speak to a lot of investors because A, I'm in the fundraising mode, B, I was also fundraising for the previous fund that I was managing. So mostly when I talk to these people, they don't want to invest in therapeutics because they say it's too risky, it's too long, and also they say, longevity clinical trial, what is it? What are we talking about? Great, thank you. What are we talking about? So it's extremely difficult to fundraise for a fund that manages these longevity companies. Secondly, there's a lot of confusion even in the longevity companies themselves. So when I used to manage all my portfolio companies, often we would debate about what is the right indication to go after. Are we a $1 billion company? Because my indication or my intervention strategy, I think, touches all the hallmarks. So am I able to go after every one of the chronic diseases associated with longevity? So as a result, am I a $1 billion company? Or since there is no clinical pathway or a regulatory pathway, should I focus on a small orphan indication, and therefore is my valuation only a $500 million? So these kind of confusions, questions exist. So this is a rich panel that could shed light on all these aspects. So I would like to divide the questions into 4 baskets. The first one is, of course, regulation. What needs to happen? Where are we today? What are the bottlenecks? And then I would like to focus on, if Neer was here, he would have shed a lot of light on the difficulties he's facing in conducting a public-facing clinical trial in terms of fundraising. And of course, we all have our own issues and problems with fundraising. We can discuss that. And then the third problem that I would like to focus on is technology. Are we ready for clinical trials and longevity? Lastly, because we have the good fortune of having Evelyn, we can also talk about how do we educate? We are all here. We are all excited about the future. We've seen a lot of technology. We appreciate the advances that have been made. And we have longevity clinical concept that didn't exist a few years ago amongst us here today. But then how do we spread the word? How do we bring in education in the larger public? How do we educate the investors especially to come along and appreciate the developments we're making in longevity? So let's start with the policy part, because we have people representing from different regions of the different geographic regions, Switzerland and pharma, and then Evelyn from Israel and China, and maybe, I don't know, maybe a lot of other places. So, and Justin, of course, with a very novel concept he talked about. So let's start with you. The policy, where are we today? What needs to happen towards the future? What are the bottlenecks that need to be solved?
Well, probably I can mainly echo on what I closed my talk with. I think a critical part will be to lift longevity medicine, longevity clinic on a board level certification level. And I think that's what you and Andrea are working on, is that we have training programs, guidelines, data collection, recommendation based on hard science, on medicine, that allows people to undergo a proper medical training in that specialty. And with that, then of course you can allocate resources. It's much easier to apply for grants. It's easier to apply for funding, to attract industry, because you're a recognized society. So I think this is, in medicine, one of the key parts, because in longevity science, if to distinguish that, there has always been some aging research. I don't think that's the point, but longevity itself, there was geriatrics, there was internal medicine, there is whatsoever discipline, and basically longevity is targeting many, many different parts of the clinical discipline. And so with that, I think that's the right next step.
Yeah, I think, I fully agree. I think also, I think it started at med school. I think at med school there's very little focus on prevention. When I was at med school, we had, out of the 6 years, 1 week of nutrition, right? So there's very little of this mindset. You learn 3 years how to, read pathology, how to treat it, but very little about, what are actually the basics for human health, which is a bit of a pity. Now, I think what is changing, obviously, so longevity is being caught as a name even by big companies, pharmaceutical and nutrition as well, and those are those also that have the medical channels. Nestle has like a network of 1 million HCPs around the world. So if we start leveraging such channels, and I think they go way beyond the big sales force you need today with social media. With digital tools, you can actually reach a lot of the medical community without having like a gigantic, expensive sales force.
Right. I of course echo my friends here, and what we are trying to bring to the understanding also of the public is that if you are going to a doctor because you have a problem, you also try to trust that the way he's or she is labeling him or herself, you go to a gastroenterologist, you cannot trust that there was a training behind, a medical at least, and a post-training after, and there was an exam, and somebody trained that person and certified that person. So basically the same we want to do now for longevity medicine, starting with small steps, because it's long, but we need to be fast, so probably longevity medicine will be put first as a subspecialty, probably of internal medicine, because it fits mostly there. And at the same time, we need to also have a network or a framework to certify clinics, right? So, and we already are, as Andrea mentioned, in the process of writing the recommendations and then the guidelines. After finding the right definition, we are now bringing this into the point of the regulatory, where there will be really frameworks that a doctor cannot go from or deviate from that much. Or if he or she deviates, because that's what we also do in the sick care, it will be labeled as passionate use, off-label use whatsoever. And then the patient is aware that it is not under the umbrella of a special discipline like longevity medicine, but it is available here because it's off-label, self-risk whatsoever. So, so what should happen in the regulatory? You mentioned this because this is what we can bring from our side, but from the regulatory side, we need more flexibility and open-minded people sitting there, because as Philip mentioned, we had 1 week nutrition and several weeks on physics of radiotherapy. It's not wrong, but it's just lacking. It's not there. So education of the regulatory is also one of the things that we are trying to do, and in America it's more progress than elsewhere, but hopefully also now really with the establishment of public, said university, hospital, longevity departments, such as us in Israel and in Singapore and in Mayo, and spreading all over the world. Hopefully from there, we will get to this awareness from both sides and end up having this certification. And, at some point of time here, we will be presenting more, how to become a longevity physician, and yes.
Thank you, but I have a follow-up question for you on that, Evelyn, before I move on to Justin. So you talked about having medical degrees in longevity. That's a fine concept. But when you talk about getting these clinics approved, would you look forward to central government authority regulating this, or would it be private consortium that would be looking at certifying these clinics?
I think there will be, in general, different degree, because we will still have longevity clinics in a private setting, right? So the regulatory there is different, just like for any other private clinic. But it would be almost mandatory to have an absolutely independent consortium that is unbiased, that would have clear guidelines on how to certify even those places if they are labeling themselves healthy longevity clinics, right? And most of them most probably will. So what we see right now in the community is that those clinics actually would love to do that. And of course, public sector is public sector. That has to be regulated as per country. Yeah.
But maybe to quickly comment on that, because we as Maximum, one of our companies is a UNA clinic that will open its doors in December. So we have been just going through exactly this process. And one is, yes, of course, we have very clear scientific evidence for whatsoever treatment, but also to give the confidence. I mean, usually, I can only speak about Switzerland, Germany, the DACH region, and US probably the same. Many devices we use, they have already independent certification. Yeah, it's not that these clinics use things that are totally newly generated or there's according lab tests whatsoever are also tested. Their hygienics concept we need to write. So we have 100 pages where we describe what we're doing in these clinics, which need to be submitted to the authorities, which evaluate that for 3 months, etc. So even though there is no clinic certificate by some whatsoever organization, I think there are, at least in the countries where most of us are living, already quite a large bunch. I think it's more the question of what do you actually offer? How much do you believe in what actually brings something that comes us again to this level of evidence pyramid?
So that I would be making my second question, because what is in the toolkit? What technological advances do we need to make sure the toolkit meets the expectations of the patients? Before we get on to that question, I would like to ask Justin.
Microphone.
Please.
So the question is about regulation.
I'm going to rephrase the question for you.
Okay.
Because despite
Probably
all
a good idea.
Despite all the pessimism that you expressed in the beginning of your talk, I thought that was one of the most optimistic talks, especially because it looks far into the future. You don't? Okay, no problem. At least that's my opinion. Now when we look at what you spoke about, it's far, far away from a single micromolecule for a single disease model that the whole world is used to. Now, you're talking about multiple organs, not even one organ at a time in a multiple organ setting with immune measures taken before the organ transplantation even begins. So what kind of regulatory changes would make that even a possibility, if not today, 5 years or 10 years from now?
I mean, so in general, as far as the regulatory environment is concerned, the FDA, I think it's a barrier, but I actually don't think it's the important barrier. I think the biggest barrier of all is just making something that actually works at all, and once you can do that, like the FDA lets you do clinical trials. If this kind of organ transplant system, I mean, initially, obviously, it would be in people that have, like, you know, your very first patients would be like people in multi-organ failure. Like surgeons actually have a great, deal of discretion for doing these things. And the reason these patients don't get organ transplants today is because these organ transplant ethics boards don't let them have them because they're the worst candidates for them, right? As I mentioned earlier, like when you get organ transplants today, you get them from some poor young person that's dead, and you're taking their organs. If organs are much more readily available, you'll be able to put them into these kinds of things. And I don't know if the first patients that receive these treatments are going to be getting everything at once, or they're going to be getting a few single organs. I mean, that's not really important at first. Does that answer your question, or did I answer something else?
It partially answers my question, because now you talk about the sources of these cells. I think somebody had that question for you, and that needs to be approved by all ethics boards and also the regulatory authorities, and then you have the transplantation setting that needs to be changed, and also these organs. How would you get them to be approved? How would you compare them to the normal organ that is ready for transplantation versus the one that has been engineered in the laboratory, like what you would?
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, like, for any treatment, you need to do some kind of clinical trial, like whether there's an FDA or not, you need to do that because you need to know if what you're doing is actually beneficial, and you need to measure this, like in some way. And I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing is increasing the supply, because there's a ton of people that need organs, they don't get them, they need them to live, and they die because they don't have an organ to give to them. So, I mean, I think that if there's something available that you can put in these people, I mean, it's the same kind of, regulatory environment that the Syncardia was able to put their artificial hearts into people. These people got artificial hearts because they didn't have a regular heart to put into them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are good questions to have, good problems to have. So the next question I have for the panel is, again, coming back to the toolbox. Whenever you look at what is available in the longevity medicine space, or people often talk about rapamycin, people talk about metformin, people talk about supplements. And Andrea's talk alluded to a lot of additional things coming in. So in your opinion, what are the newest things that people should be excited about? So I'll start with you.
So I always say, if people argue what's right, we simply don't know it. Yeah, and I think that's, for many parts, what we're talking here about. Is it metformin? Is it rapamycin? Is it Ozempic? I mean, we have some degree of data. Yeah, we know something, sometimes about mice, something in humans, sometimes maybe 100, sometimes maybe 1,000 patients. But if we would know what it would be, we wouldn't discuss that question, okay? So I think, again, I just need to come back to that. We need to have more money to really have a sharp answer on that. What we can discuss, what are the new kids on the block? I mean, I think we were speaking about the GLP agonists. This is maybe something what I, as a physician, am pretty enthusiastic about. I'm not sure how you think it, so it's always interesting to hear other people's opinions. I think this is interacting on multiple nodes. What we know from the aging pathway, in the endocrinology, metabolics pathway, so these Ozempic, the weight loss drugs, that's what I'm talking about for those who don't know the target. I do think, in addition to that, when we all know that if you're obese, if you're just too heavy, you get joint problems, you get heart problems, you get a fatty liver, so you have all of these accumulative effects coming up because you have this original problem. That's what I also meant when I said we need to go in earlier and identify the key drivers. So I think, independently of the mechanism I just mentioned, if you're able to help people healthily, sustainably lose weight and maintain a healthy weight, I think this is a big promise. And in addition, if this is able to work on specific nodes, that's great. And for the other, especially if we speak about drugs, I think we need to see what's coming. And in general, I very much believe in the pyramid, that we need to have a structured approach, diagnostics, supplements, etc., then medications, where we can work our way up from there.
Philip?
So first a general statement, and then more specifically, I think what you said is very right. Like, if you work previously in your talk, when you do preclinical research, I think it's okay for scientists to fall in love with a solution and to be passionate about it. The moment it's in medical hands, don't fall in love with the solution, right? Then you have to go by the data, and you have to go, most importantly, by the safety profile. So if you use it for compassionate use, safety must be available. And then, of course, you can explore how it works. I think this is really the basics. Now, to what you said, yes, we are excited about the GLP-1 agonists. I'm a bit scared when I hear that, the UK government wants to give it to, hundreds of thousands or millions of people, if it's not in the context of behavior change, because once you stop, we know already people rebound very quickly. So the moment you don't give them the rest of the tools, which is lifestyle consultation, nutrition, consultation, I think it's maybe even a waste of money. So I think it has to be really put in context and has to be holistic.
I very much agree with that.
Yeah, just to extend that, do you think there has to be a BMI cutoff as to who gets put on these Ozempic and all these GLP agonists? Or you think anybody who feels Because most of us always feel we are fat, right? So is there a distinction to be made there?
Ooh, difficult question. I'm not sure if there's any hard data on that. I mean, so far it has been running by BMI. Everything else is really speculative. I can only say that I agree with the behavioral changes. And then if you do them, you don't need Ozempic anymore, and then you don't have the thyroid risk or whatsoever. Look, I don't want to advocate for that. I just say this might be the new kid on the block. Maybe in 10 years we know more. Maybe it's something completely different. Yeah, it's interesting to see what's coming.
I disagree with the behavior changes. And not to say that people shouldn't change their behavior, they absolutely should. It's just that they don't. I mean, we know this from many studies that, I mean, if it requires behavior changes, then it's only like a residual few percent that are actually going to do that. So if it needs that, then it's not going to work.
I disagree. I mean, we have cognitive behavioral therapy for multiple issues, if it's whatever menopause, or what I'm saying is not even only mental issues. So, I mean, there's structured training programs where you can learn that. It's about the identification of a problem. I'm not a psychologist by training, but I mean, there are hard studies that if you do it in a controlled, supervised way, these things are working well, whether it's for weight loss or for other indications. And there are certifications for that and data on that.
That as well. See, for example, even getting on to Ozempic can act as a positive motivator, because once you know exactly what it feels to be agile, once you're not carrying that extra weight anymore, that induces you to change your behavior so that you adhere to that framework.
I just hope that, you know, it's okay to do a course of Ozempic every year or two.
Of course we hope, right? But
No, but I mean, back to this, I think we know behavior change works, and we know this from studies. Like the moment the smart watches came on, or the Garmin watches, like it had a profound impact on how much people walk and exercise. So we know just the feedback by numbers can work. Again, I think as I said before, like not everyone is number driven, but a lot of us are. And I think also for positive behavior change in general, using biomarkers and so on will help some people to drive behavior change. And I also agree, I mean, just to put things in context, like if you, before you had the GLP-1 agonist, like one of the main approaches was complete meal replacement. And it works very well. You get very good weight loss efficacy. Now you have, and we have no affiliation with them now, but now you have like companies that use cognitive behavioral therapy. So basically it's not strong caloric restriction, it's all based on how people eat, and they reach very similar weight loss efficacy, so, and I think combinations of those, helping with the right products, helping with behavior therapy, and yes, helping us initially also with the GLP-1 agonist, I think it will be very powerful, but it has to be put together.
Well, I mean, we debated a bit from the first question, from your question, which I love the discussion, right? So I believe what we are very excited about as patients or as doctors are more diagnostic tools and more monitoring tools, right? I know that interventions are very tempting, and it's nice to have a quick solution. Behavioral changes are not easy. That's why people are not that motivated. Nevertheless, they work, right, to some extent. But I guess what we are excited about is that the new tools can enforce them and monitor them. And for us, it's data. So based on this data, we can then actually know how can we individualize and maybe make it a bit easier for those who cannot do everything, right, and motivate a bigger, larger population on that. But at the same time, I guess in terms of interventions, not sure how quick that will be, but I'm mostly excited about senolytics and xenomorphics, and not necessarily only in longevity by healthy individuals, but also in those who are sick. Now we know that senolytics work well in cancer patients, and I mean, as we are starting our interventions in longevity, we will not only have always healthy patients that we would like to help. We try to be as inclusive as possible. So I think those points make me very optimistic towards the future. Yeah.
Thank you. This question is not for any of us, but for Martin. First, when we started the panel, it showed 3 minutes. Later, it showed 4 minutes. Now it's showing 2. How much time do we have left? 4? That's unfair. Anyway. Okay, now Maximon is a combination of a venture builder, health longevity clinic, and also I think you started as a venture fund. And you are in the investing arm, so you have raised a lot of money to kickstart this many programs. So you were being an entrepreneur and raise money. So we all have this problem, and we listen to Maier saying that he's been speaking about metformin trials for years and trying to put together the money. And even now, he's only got 1/3 of what he needs. So how do we make sure that a lot more money comes into this field? And I mean, this could help all of us and a lot of people sitting here. I would love to maybe start with Justin, because he's been able to raise money for a very, very ambitious project.
I mean, without speaking about my own project, it was actually very easy to raise money for. Like, I think in general, the main thing that will make, you know, a waterfall of money pour into the, you know, anti-aging biology space is having any real clinical success whatsoever. And I mean, that's kind of the next barrier that we need to cross. And once we have that, like, the money will not be limiting. And what will become even more limiting than it is today is directing all of that, you know, potential energy, because I think it's also very easy to waste essentially infinite dollars. And they like, if we're running very strongly, we better be sure we're running in the right direction. That answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I don't engage directly with fundraising and so on. But I'm, you know, I find myself talking a lot to venture funds and also advice from Maximon, right, which is an exception, because it's all about the people, and those were the very credible people around, and I love the projects. But I think what, you know, we can do from our side as academicians or physicians or people from the community that are not in the industry per se, just affiliated and collaborating, is to help to educate and to bring really the message of what we see as important, what we see is really lacking behind, just because of the funds, not because of lack of perspective, and also to do what we do, right? To bring the cohorts, so open the clinics, right? For me personally, one of the very important things would be also to have those clinics that are public work together with the clinics that are private, because we are all generating data that are very important at the end of the day also for those projects to train, and then they can go and probably give to the investors the point, okay, we know what we have, we know what we will be training on, and we are ready. And I guess that would facilitate a lot of processes.
And I mean, that's a fine point, but unfortunately, most investors, especially the ones that are not used to longevity crowds, they don't like being educated. They don't like to see the data, the data hours. Over to you, Philip.
Well, I agree. I think, I mean, everyone has to get the storytelling right, you know, and often, you know, if you go to large corporations or investment funds, you need the data as a basis, but you cannot bore the investor with data. You know, you have to tell the story why it's important to invest, and I think the storytelling is really key there. I think what will bring in more money is success, you know, scientific success, and then commercial success. It's quite easy in this sense. And then I think it's collaboration. I think the big privilege of this community is it's a very open community. I think it's, you know, between longevity clinics, academics, small companies, big companies, there's just so much potential to work together. Probably a lot of the solutions are already out there. We just have to test them together.
So I think let's say two words about Maximon and then what I believe about the investment part. So we are a company builder, so a company that builds company, that helps scientists, for example, to start a company, and this is backed by an investment fund. So Tobias is mainly in charge of the fundraising to getting 100 million in place, that this is then supporting the companies to really grow and prosper. So there are people who need to invest in that fund, right, to enable the building of these companies. And why do these people invest? Some are individuals, some are other funds, some are corporations, etc. And I think it's mainly three things. One is hope. it's rigorosity of what you do and execution. And I think all three need to be in place to be successful and to successfully raise and continue getting this money. And I think that's also a bit what happened in previous times, is that it was mainly played on the hope side, saying, yes, organs will be whatever, immediately available, we have an infinite lifespan, whatever, that's great. But the other two components to say, yes, what you said, we have the scientific evidence, we have really these clear guidelines, the cutoff, and what you said, the execution, how do we really bring these things on the table that they are successful and prove to be successful? Then I don't want to say easy, because it's not easy, but that will probably be a way to be successful in raising money and bringing the field forward.
Fantastic, thank you. I want to close this with just one additional comment. For me, the longevity clinics and this whole movement towards that is a very positive development, because each time you treat a patient and the patient feels better, it's education, right? So I think this is one right way to spread the word about longevity and the progress we're making. And yes, I hope we get to do more of that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to all of you for the panel.